Mr. Trump's approval ratings have fallen to under 40% in polls that he dismissed as fake. His return to the White House is just about a year in, and voter skepticism is intensifying with turbulence in several policies.
In the spotlight, flip-flops on tariffs. The Supreme Court struck down his flagship Liberation Day levies. It then announced a 10% global duty, then hiked it to 15%, but only the 10% went into effect on Tuesday. Voters concerned about the cost of living have blamed his tariffs.
And there's also backlash against his tough crackdown on illegal immigrants after 2 Americans were killed in Minnesota. On the military front, the U.S. looks increasingly poised to attack Iran over its nuclear program. Polls suggest most Americans do not support a war with Iran.
And as always, Simon Marks is across the story for CNA. He joins us now live from Washington, D.C. Hey, Simon, good to see you again. So what could President Trump possibly say in his speech to try and reverse the approval slide that may, of course, translate to lost votes in the coming midterm elections?
Look, he's got an absolutely massive task ahead of him here this evening, Arnold, and any president facing the kind of political headwinds that Donald Trump now finds himself buffeted by would find it very difficult, political analysts argue, to change people's minds in a single speech. But if you look at the opinion polls that were published here within the last 48 hours, both the CNN opinion poll and the Washington Post opinion poll show that 63% and 60% respectively of voters disapprove of the job that he's doing in office. And critically, the CNN poll reveals that among independent voters, people who sometimes vote for the Democrats, sometimes vote for the Republicans, always end up deciding the outcome of elections, including this November's midterms, a whopping 73% of independents disapprove of what he's doing. His advisors want this to be a speech that connects with Americans, that sees the president express his understanding of the pain that Americans say they feel every weekend when they go into the supermarket or the grocery store or the restaurant and find themselves facing a battle with affordability, not just the weekly shop, but energy prices here soaring as well, particularly this winter. Whether Donald Trump can find the language to do that rather than do what he normally does, which is to say, but the stock market's soaring, the value of your 401k retirement accounts, which Americans can't access until they turn 59 and a half years old, is rising. He's got to go beyond that kind of language to deal with the affordability issue that is on the minds of many Americans. Iran is also an issue over which he's facing renewed pressure. Just here tonight, Democrats have received a classified briefing from Secretary of State Marco Rubio. They say that the administration is serious about the possibility now of taking military action against Iran, and they want the president to explain to the American public what the plan is and why he thinks he needs to take that action. But most of all, the question here is going to be, can he deliver a focused speech? There are reports coming out of the White House and Congress tonight, and the president himself has said this is a long speech, that the speech could be as long as 2, maybe even 2.5 hours long. And that will not necessarily mitigate in favor of connecting with voters unless the president finds some way of keeping the television audience engaged throughout that kind of very long address.
Yeah, Simon, and the president will also face the very judges who upturned his tariff policy and his response to impose new duties of 10% and then 15%. That is causing widespread confusion, especially among countries which have been told to stick to the trade deals that were struck earlier. I mean, how is the Trump administration looking to resolve this?
Look, it's still very confused, and certainly there's going to be a dramatic moment when those 9 justices from the Supreme Court parade into the chamber of the House of Representatives in their robes, as they traditionally do every year. They will be sitting right beneath the president, who on Friday excoriated the court generally, and particularly 2 of his appointees, saying that he was ashamed by their decision to vote against his tariff policies. Countries all over the world are piling pressure on the White House and the Treasury to explain what the president's plan is. This 15% across the board tariff that he's announced can remain in force only for 150 days without the president going to Congress. He insists he doesn't need to go to Congress. What that means for America's trading partners remains very unclear. And also unclear is what's going to happen to the $150 to $175 billion in duties that the Treasury has collected since the tariffs were implemented. Importers and businesses overseas want that money back. It's clear that President Trump will not tonight be able to announce that he's sending checks to every American taxpayer, as he had previously proposed, based on the amount of tariff revenues that he has collected. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, within the last few hours, conceding that that plan is now off the table because the money eventually is going to have to be refunded.
All right, Simon, thank you very much for the preview. Simon Marks reporting for CNA from Washington, D.C.